Good morning. It is Friday, the 27th of March. I'm Maeve McMahon, and you're watching Europe Today. That's your daily digest of European news and analysis in just 20 minutes. Coming up this weekend marks 4 weeks since the late Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed, an event which has triggered a wider war and global instability. Threats to shipping have brought the crucial Strait of Hormuz to a standstill, sending energy prices soaring. A number of European countries have rushed to pass emergency packages to soften the blow to their economies as Eurozone bonds tumble and Wall Street hits a major low. Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine continues with stray Russian drones landing in the Baltics this week. We'll be crossing live to the Finnish capital shortly. But first, G7 foreign ministers are gathering in France today for crucial talks. This as President Trump says the US will stop targeting Iranian energy sites for another 10 days as talks are ongoing with Tehran. For more on the talks today in France, that will of course be dominated by the war in the Middle East, Euronews correspondent Maya Delaboom joins us here in the studio. Good morning, Maya. So look, all eyes, of course, on the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio today at those talks. Will he be able to convince his counterparts, though, that the US really does have a plan here to end this war?
I mean, he will have to convince, but he will also have to reassure them that there is an exit plan, because we have heard from US President Donald Trump that there are negotiations between the American and the Iranian side, but we don't know much about what these talks are about. And in the meantime, you have, strikes that are ongoing in the region. And now we have Trump saying it is in the interest of Iran to negotiate the deal. Let's take a listen.
They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal. And anybody that saw what was happening over there would understand why they want to make a deal. I say they're lousy fighters, but they're great negotiators.
President Trump there. And just, Maya, fill us in. What else is up for discussion today at those talks?
So besides Iran, which is the main topic of the day, there is Gaza. The ministers will call for a ceasefire in Gaza, but they will also say more humanitarian aid is needed there. Clearly, as you know, there are divisions also with their relationship with Israel, especially the Europeans. They will also talk about Ukraine, which is the main topic on the agenda. How do we maintain the support for Ukraine, but also how do they intend to put more pressure on Russia? And that is the key question here. All the attention is on Russia because Russia is involved in two conflicts. You have Ukraine, but also there is Iran. And so these two conflicts are intertwined. And this is what, the EU's chief diplomat said yesterday as she entered the G7. Do not separate the two conflicts and do not separate Russia's key role here. Let's take a listen.
We see that Russia is helping Iran with intelligence to target Americans, to kill Americans. And Russia is also supporting Iran now with the drones. These wars are very much interlinked. So if America wants the war in the Middle East to stop, Iran to stop attacking them, they should also put the pressure on Russia.
Kaya Kallas there. And Maya, this summit also is coming ahead of the big G7 summit taking place in June. There's a bit of controversy here, though, about South Africa's participation. It looks like they won't be invited now.
Yes, there was a lot of pressure from the US on France, which is presiding the G7, to boycott South Africa. So clearly these are accusations from Donald Trump about, mistreatment of white farmers in South Africa. Also, Trump is very angry at South Africa because of Gaza. They have filed a legal complaint for crimes against humanity, against Israel. So these are part of, the conflict that there is, which is basically between US and South Africa. But it shows you that, geopolitics are not just about decision. It's about who sits at the table.
Indeed. Maya Delaboom, thank you so much for that update. We'll, of course, keep a very close eye on those meetings today. But in case you're sitting there and actually wondering what exactly is this G7 forum and what it aspires to achieve, you're not the only one. Jakob Yanis takes a look.
You might have heard about G7 meetings, and one is happening right now in France as we speak. And the foreign ministers of one of the most advanced economies are gathering to tackle a world on fire. But your reporter started to wonder, what exactly is this group doing? And does it still have the power to fix global crises? The Group of Seven is an exclusive informal club made up of the United States, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan and the United Kingdom, alongside the EU. And they have immense economic gravity. When the G7 unifies on freezing assets or setting global taxes, the rest of the world listens and usually adapts. And as they meet today, they will discuss ceasefire plans in Gaza, securing maritime passage in the Strait of Hormuz, backing Ukraine and adding more sanctions on Russia's shadow fleet. And it all feels like history is repeating itself. After all, the G7 was created on the French initiative, following the 1970s oil crisis. And it all sounds nice, but you might be wondering, does it actually have power? And the answer depends on how we define it. The G7 cannot pass binding international laws, and it has no combined military. Every pledge relies entirely on leaders keeping their promises back home. But not everything is so sweet as it faces structural limits. By limiting its membership to traditional Western powers, it does overlook the global South and the rapid expansion of BRICS Plus, so a coalition of emerging economies, proves the G7 is no longer the only heavyweight in the international affairs. And as Donald Trump pushes to make global policy entirely by himself, the G7 might seem like a relic. However, it stands as a major attempt to keep the world's biggest democracies working together, rather than each going it alone.
And as those talks get underway today, President Trump has said he will delay attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure until the 6th of April. He claims that talks with Iran on a peace deal are going, quote, very well, but the Iranian regime has said it has doubts about Washington's willingness to negotiate. To find out exactly what is the Iranian counter-ceasefire plan, we can cross now to Euronews' newsroom in Lyon and bring in our Babak Kamir, that's the head of our Persian news service. Good morning, Babak. Just tell us, the Iranian regime so far is rejecting President Trump's plans to talk. So what exactly is their proposal?
Listen, what we know about Iran's plan largely comes from Iranian media reports. It includes several key demands: the withdrawal of U.S. troops from the Middle East, guarantees against any further strikes on Iran, compensation for damages, and recognition of Iran's missile program. At the same time, Tehran has dismissed a proposal from Trump, describing them as an unrealistic list of demands. In reality, both sides are putting forward conditions that the other is highly unlikely to accept. From Iran's perspective, giving up core elements such as its missile program would go directly against the Islamic Republic's strategic doctrine. In fact, accepting such terms could fundamentally undermine the system itself, something Trump has at times hinted at in the context of regime change. We are also seeing mixed signals. On the one hand, Trump has extended his deadline and posed a potential strike for another 10 days. On the other, there are credible reports of increased U.S. military deployment in the region. The gap between the two sides remains extremely wide. Even 10 weeks, not just 10 days, would likely not be enough to bridge it. So while some of this may still be signaling or strategic bluffing, the overall picture is clear. The positions remain fundamentally incompatible, and the risk of escalation is not only real, it may be increasing.
Okay. Babak Kamir, thank you so much for that update there from Euronews Lyon. Now, Lebanon was drawn into this war in early March when Tehran-backed Hezbollah began firing rockets into Israel, and Israel fired back. The Lebanese cabinet has now said that Israel is, quote, threatening Lebanon's sovereignty and will file a complaint with the Security Council in this regard. The humanitarian impact in just a couple of weeks has been devastating, with over 1 million displaced in Lebanon and many, many dead. For The View now from Lebanon. Coming up, we'll be joined by Ghassan Salameh, a huge academic and political figure in Lebanon, currently serving as the Minister of Culture since February 2025. Good morning, Minister. Thank you so much for joining us here on Euronews.
Thank you for inviting me.
Just first question, how severe is the situation in southern Lebanon, especially right now?
Well, I think I agree with the Associated Press qualification of what is happening. Yesterday, AP has shifted from something quite vague into saying exactly that it's an invasion. I used to say it's a creeping action by the Israeli military, and I say since yesterday, it's now an invasion.
And Israel is saying clearly that it wants to create a buffer zone in South Lebanon. Are you fearing now a land grab? We've even heard one far-right Israeli minister calling for annexation.
Yes, that's true. We take seriously all these statements. I take seriously what Smotrich said, that he wants to occupy and annex all the area south of the Litani. I take even more seriously what Katz, the Minister of Defense, said, that he wants to have a buffer zone until the Litani. The problem is the following. There is a long history of Israel with buffer zones. They had a buffer zone in South Lebanon for 22 years until the year 2000, when they withdrew and said, we don't need it anymore. It is doing harm to us more than it is doing any good. But now the new form of buffer zone they are trying to implement on the ground is very different. Wherever they go, they don't leave any civilian. They don't leave any house. They don't leave any possibility for civilians to go back to houses because they are absolutely destroying all the villages. 34 of them have been destroyed, and therefore what they are, the new concept of the buffer zone is a much more radical one, much more damaging for the civilian population.
And tell me, how are you supporting, how's your government supporting civilian populations? Are you encouraging people to stay in areas that are under attack, or should they flee? And do you have enough support for these people on the ground?
It is very difficult to support them because very often ambulances are hit, relief trucks are hit, etc. So no, we leave it to them to decide what they do. But whenever they move from their homes, we take care of them. And that's why we have now more than 700 shelters across the country where they are received and properly treated and fed. I am going immediately after this interview to visit 3 or 4 of these shelters in the outskirts of Beirut. We take care of them, and I should say that the flow of international aid is starting to come and to help us by sea and by air, and we have put in place a service of very rapid distribution. Once we get any help, it goes almost the same day to those who need it. We have now more than 1,100,000 people. That's 1 out of 5 Lebanese who has been displaced, and some, I would say 17 or 18% of them live in these shelters.
And any hopes for talks with the Israelis to bring an end to this?
We offer. The President of the Republic offered negotiating with Israel. We didn't have the proper answer so far. And we haven't been able to encourage possible mediators to put enough pressure on Israel to answer to our proposal. But the proposal was officially made by the President 3 weeks ago.
And even if there is a ceasefire eventually between the US, Israel and Iran to end the war, to what extent could Lebanon just be left to be destroyed?
It can be left to be destroyed. We need to, here we are navigating very, very prudently between 2 possible scenarios we don't like. One, that there is a ceasefire in the Gulf, although I don't see it right now. I don't see it, but this is another story. But suppose you have a ceasefire in the Gulf and Lebanon is left to itself to be destroyed entirely by the Israelis. This is one horrible scenario. The other, no less horrible scenario is that Lebanon is one item on somebody else's agenda to negotiate. We don't want anybody to negotiate for us because we know that it will be a serious violation of our sovereignty.
Okay. Minister Salami, thank you so much for speaking to us here this morning on Euronews on Europe Today. Take care.
Thank you.
Now, of course, although the world's focus is very much on Iran, the threat of Russia is still Europe's #1 concern. but the two wars are very much interrelated. And if hostilities continue in the Middle East, there are fears for NATO's ability to deal with so much widespread conflict. NATO allies have been meeting in Helsinki, Finland, to discuss all this, and that is exactly where our NATO correspondent Shona Murray finds herself as well this morning. So good morning, Shona. Thanks so much for joining us. Just tell us, how is Europe addressing security matters amidst the war in the Middle East?
Well, Maeve, as we heard from NATO yesterday, Russia remains the biggest threat to European security. But as you mentioned there, these wars are very much intertwined. And we've had reports over the past few days that apparently crucial military equipment destined for Ukraine from the United States could be diverted to Iran as the war in Iran grinds on. Now, NATO has said that this isn't the case, that material is still flowing to Ukraine, particularly interceptors. But I heard from someone this morning who said this is probably inevitable that this may happen. In addition to that, here in Helsinki, we had the leaders of the Baltics and the Arctic countries, in particular the Prime Minister of Norway and President Stubb of Finland, saying yesterday, repeating the mantra, that the war in Iran is not NATO's war, NATO is a defensive organisation. Now, that's problematic because if you see what Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, last night said on the way to the G7, he said, well, in actual fact, Ukraine isn't the United States war, so we'll have to take that into account. So there could be some conflict here. But for now in Helsinki, I'm joined by Valérie Ayer, a French MEP and leader of the Renew group in the European Parliament. Valérie, for how long do you think NATO can stay out of the war in Iran?
Let's be clear, this is not our war. And a shift of attention on Ukraine would be a huge mistake. Europe's security is Ukraine's security, and Ukraine's security is Europe's security. Russia is the first threat for us, and that's why we have to be fully committed and to empower ourselves.
But what we heard from Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, yesterday was that, well, the United States is really helping in this war with Ukraine and Russia because of the negotiations at the table. Now Marco Rubio is saying, if you don't help us in Iran, we won't help you with Ukraine and Russia anymore.
Ukraine is not a bargaining chip. And this is not, Iran's war is not our war. We stand here today in Finland. This is the longest border between the EU and Russia. We have to defend Finland. We have to defend Ukraine. We have to defend the EU. And this is our top priority, and it remains.
But France and the UK and several other countries are a part of a sort of a joint coalition to maybe re-secure the Strait of Hormuz. Now, they say it's when the hostilities end, but they're part of that. Do you think that maybe the Europeans will need to put their shoulders to the wheel, help the Americans in order to get some payback for Ukraine?
This is not a question on helping the American. This is a question of securing the Hormuz pass to make sure that energy issues is not so harmful for Europe.
But do you think that the Europeans can do anything realistically anyway in the Strait of Hormuz, despite the fact that, of course, the European economies are really suffering?
As I said, this is a question of energy security. Also, what we have done until now at the European level is also to move on environmental transitions. What this question, this war shows us is our weakness. We are too dependent on fossil fuels, so we have to move on and to be more independent.
And the point you made there, obviously, we're in Helsinki, which has the largest border inside NATO with Russia, and a country that's very much leading the way when it comes to preparedness. Thank you very much, Valérie Ayer, for that this morning. And back to you, Maeve.
Thank you so much, Shona, for that update. And of course, to your guest there, Valérie Ayer, in what looks like a very windy, chilly Helsinki. Well, thank you so much now for tuning in to us here on Europe Today. That brings this edition to an end. Thank you so much for your company. As always, if you need any more context, news and analysis, please do visit Euronews.com. You can also download our app, and you can join us on any of our social media sites and send us direct messages if you want to get involved in the conversation. Take care and see you very soon here on Euronews.